Lucky you.
36 best holes in
Into
golf.
Alternate Shots podcast,
Barney's Army.
where we talk about
Sandy.
golf, poker,
James Bond.
horse racing,
Double.
classic movies.
Zenyatta.
We have no script.
Down the stretch they come.
We are glad you joined us.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
How lucky are we to have the Christie boys on the podcast? Bobby Christie on my left and Neil Christie on my right. You have so many memories at Wingfoot Golf Club growing up, not living far from the club. Your mom and your sister champions. Your dad was a pretty good player, I recall, a gentleman.
Well, Craig Wood was an amazing golfer, and he was probably the quietest man I ever met. And Neil and I certainly weren't the quietest kids he'd ever met, because his locker was on the same row with our dad, and we camped in that locker daily. So every time he wanted to put on his shoes, he had us scampering around to see Craig Wood, Claude Harmon, Tommy Armour, his brother Sandy Armour in the grill room, having quiet lunches together and separately with any member who wanted to sit down and talk. So that was the magic of Wingfoot that I don't think is capturable in today's world, but it was a wonder back in those days.
The fact that you had just regular old major winners sitting in the grill room.
That's right. You see pictures on the wall of Billy Casper and the other guys who have won tournaments at Wingfoot, but they never sit there. You just saw these guys who were absolute marvels in their time and how they played the game of golf, and just sitting there, not paying attention to anybody else and nobody paying attention to them. Well, he was an excellent player, but I mean, if I had to compare him to somebody, he was like the Bryson DeChambeau of his time. He was one strong, man. He was big and powerful, one of the longest drivers on tour in his time. He was something to watch. He'd walk up on the first tee with his big cigar, and I don't even know that I don't think he ever hit a ball. And he just put the tee in the ground and let it rip. What was different back then is Craig Wood and Tommy Armour and his brother Sandy chose to live in Larchmont, New York, and play golf at Wingfoot. And that's where they were going to spend their summers. I don't think he really gave a damn about ever giving a lesson to anybody. At least I never heard of anybody who took a lesson from him, being a lifetime member and the club letting him do what he wanted to do. And that was one of the beauties of Wingfoot. A Tommy Armour and a Craig Wood could be at Wingfoot doing whatever they wanted, and the members were happier than hell. The king called Tommy Armour.
Which king, by the way?
You got the king of Morocco calling Tommy Armour. And he said to Mr. Armour, or as he would have said, Monsieur Armour, I'd like you to come to Morocco and teach me how to play golf. And Tommy Armour declined and said, the guy you need is Claude Harmon. And that's how Claude got that job. Well, it was a great referral until there was the generals of the army under the king revolted when Claude was there, and he got the bejesus beat out of him. The revolt was put down, but Claude Harmon came back. I mean, he had nothing. He was black and blue from his ankles to his chest.
Oh, I mean, he was roughed up,
getting beat up with rifle butts. So when you think that when the king of Morocco calls, that boy, man, this is payday. Well, it's not always payday.
I look at that picture, and this is sort of off base, but what kind of pro shop was there back then? Because these guys are all wearing shirts and ties. It's hard to imagine a pro shop.
Claude Harmon and every other pro, at least on the weekend, wore shirts and ties.
Yeah.
And played in shirts and ties. And were always, Claude was an immaculate dresser, as they all were. The pro shop was tiny. The office was on the left, just past where the caddy shack is. And the desk was right there. And the whole left side of the pro shop was sets of clubs, had a few racks of shirts and stuff and bags, but I mean, nothing.
Mostly equipment.
Mostly Hogan. Claude was a Hogan guy, so it was almost all Hogan.
What type of character was Mo?
Mo was a piece of work, and I got to know him pretty well. He loved to go to the racetrack, and I took him to Belmont a couple of times, and but the fun time was starting at 16. I drove him up to Saratoga, and he loved showing me around Saratoga. I'd never been there before, and I just couldn't believe what a great place it was. I got Gene Sarazen. Gene Hayden was the caddy master. He said, Neil, come out here. I want you to caddy for Gene Sarazen. Really shocked me is how big a follow through he could get. And it, when I was talking with him during the round, he said, I always tried to hit it with my right side. And sure enough, looking at that video, he just turned on the follow through like you can't believe. He had a huge hip turn on the backswing. And it was, extremely graceful and fluid, sort of like Bobby Jones. The first part of his downswing looked like he was coming over the top, but it was because he got such a good turn on the backswing. They said the same thing about Sam Snead. We're on the 5th hole east, and he hits a drive right down the middle. I'm waiting at his ball, and he drives up, and he goes, Neil, how far am I? I said, 160, Mr. Sarazen. And he goes, what club should I use? I said, 6-iron. He goes, give me the 7. I said, okay. So I gave him the 7. The pin was in the left corner, just short of middle. And he pounds his 7-iron to like a foot away. And I said, great shot. And he hands me back the club and he goes, Neil, you were right, but I like to hit my irons hard. At the end, at the 18th hole, the caddies would get paid out of the window for the Monday outings. And he doubled my caddy fee.
Tell us about the Junior Club Championship back in 1966. I noticed, by the way, just as a slight thing, that your name is on the Junior Club Championship board, and so is your nephew, Robbie Christie. But Neil never seemed to make it on that board, huh?
And don't think I don't let him forget it.
That's an older brother's job.
I beat Bobby Stewart.
Okay. That's
And
good.
I might have played Bill Kuntz, but I remember beating Bobby. I really wanted to do that. And then we get to the finals with Billy. And
Billy Harmon, that is.
Billy Harmon. And we start out playing, and I'm expecting a blitzkrieg. So I start out and I'm just playing par golf, and Billy is just screwing up every single hole. So I don't know what's going on. I don't know I'm looking at Billy, who's lifelong friend, and going, what's the matter with you? And so then we finally finished the 10th hole, and we're walking through, as Claude referred to, those very famous arches between the pro shop and the men's locker room. And I'm 7 up. And I'm going, how the hell did I get here? So I'm 7 up, and I'm thinking, well, just calmly play, non-mistake golf, don't do anything, stay out of your own way. You only got to have 2 holes and the match is over. Well, I guess Billy had enough of me winning holes, because he started out, he's winning holes and I'm not worried. And then he's winning another hole and I'm starting to get worried. And then he's winning and winning and winning. And we get to the 18th hole.
East course.
And we get to the 18th hole and I'm 1 up.
Holy cow.
So I am, as Claude used to call it, I'm spewing Con Ed all over the place, choking my brains out. And I'm also mad as hell. I said, I can't let this match go. And so we both drive in the fairway on 18, and I think we're just a little over Lynchy's Hill, that little rise in the fairway. And I think I go first. Anyway, I'm really strung out. Pins on the left side, very close to that trap. And I pull this whatever iron dead left. And I go, oh boy, couldn't have hit it in the worst spot. Billy hits it on the green, about 25 feet or so. And as I told Billy later, he said, I didn't beat you. I didn't have that hole. That was your father. Because Claude was famous for having this flop shot. Now, the only way I could have gotten that ball anywhere near the hole on the green and not have it run all the way to the other side was to hit this flop shot. And I just said, well, it's either now or never. And so I hit it to about 4 feet and somehow made that putt and have the hole with Billy, and I won the match. So we
That's a hell of a
hands.
shot from the left side.
Oh, it was the best shot I probably have hit ever, except for a hole one. So Billy shakes my hand and he's so pissed off. He walks off the front of the green, all the way around the 18th green, circles in, and he's in talking to Mo. And he's so mad. And Claude always had a saying. He had a million of them, but he had one saying that was always true in match play. He'd say, just because he said goodbye doesn't mean he's gone. And that was Billy Harmon that day. He'd said goodbye, but he sure as hell wasn't gone.
What did Claude tell Billy the night before the match?
Claude told us the next day in the pro shop that he had warned Billy, don't take Bobby Christie lightly.
Billy would say, and it wasn't 100 rounds, he'd say, out of 1,000 rounds I've played with Bob Christie, he'd go, my record is 998-2. And then he'd say, but the two were in the senior club championship and in the regular club championship.
What was the one tip, the one lesson Claude gave you that now 50 years later has still impacted you, and both of you can play at a great level and shoot 70s when you tee it up? What was that lesson that Claude gave you that you remember even this many decades ago? He
wanted to see a good shoulder turn and a full backswing. Now, what I say about Claude is he taught by exaggeration. So if I was taking it outside, he'd say, you got to take it inside. And a lot of times he would teach the backswing by telling you how to follow through. Follow through high, and that would help you kind of take a full swing and finish high. Ben Hogan said, the flatter my swing gets, the fatter my wallet gets. So he'd have these funny little sayings, and I watched him teach my mother a bunch of times, and he would try to teach Mom the hip move, and he'd have her slamming car doors shut with her hip and having her hit the tire he had on the range,
Yeah.
And she's there over whacking the tire with a 6-iron or something. Claude was unbelievable. Like, teaching Bobby that flop shot, he taught us all that.
They say Tiger and Rory have great short games. Would you put Claude Harmon's short game up against those two today?
Back then, yes. Yeah. His short game could have been the best of all time. There's a story where Gary Player's son's in the practice bunker at Wingfoot, and Claude walks over to give him a couple of tips, and Gary Player's son goes, thank you, sir, but my father's the best bunker player, one of the best bunker players in the world, and he's giving me tips. And Claude said, who do you think taught him? And walked away.
The tip that sticks with me the most is Claude. He was absolutely a spectacular teacher, and he said, as he'd quote Ben Hogan all the time, he'd said, the answers are in the dirt. You got to learn what your swing does when you're practicing and what it does when you're playing. He said, when you're practicing, always aim at something. Claude is saying, if you aim at nothing, you'll hit it every time.
Bobby, thank you very much for sharing, and Neil for sharing those great tips. We'll all remember those long ago tips from Claude Harmon and try to incorporate them in our game today because they're still relevant today. But relevant
Sounds like
today,
Billy Harmon's going to remember him forever also. With
yeah,
that flop shot.
yeah. We'll see if Billy Harmon has a response. Maybe he'll come on the podcast. Billy, what do you think? We'll invite Billy right now. Billy, anytime you want to come on the podcast, you got
Take a few shots back.
Take a few bow shots back.
You can concentrate on the back 8.
And you could tell the whole story about the 998.
Well, first I got to start off by saying Tommy Armour was one of the unique characters in the world. He was blind in one eye from mustard gas in World War I. He was a renowned boxer, and he was a concert violinist, or concert quality violinist. Tommy was great at telling stories. So he'd be telling a story about the British Open in 1923. And he said, when they go, well, we were at Royal Birkdale on the 3rd hole, and Sandy would immediately interrupt him. He said, Tommy, it wasn't Royal Birkdale, it was Troon. It wasn't the second round. Anyway, it would go back and forth like that for the whole time they were sitting there. They would never agree on anything. But anyway, Tommy was as acerbic as it could be and a great sense of humor. So he somehow benights me with going out with him in his cart on an August hot morning, and we're going to play 10 holes. And Tommy hit some shots, but he was getting on, and it wasn't easy. So he had his front bucket must have had 100 Tommy Armour golf balls in it. So he'd tell me each hole, he said, where are you setting up? Like on 1 east. He'd say that, I'd go and I'd tee up, and he said, nay. Nope. That's stupid. And he'd call me every name in the book. He said, you tee up here because you don't want to go in that trap on the left, and you don't want to have the out of bounds in play. Well, it would go on like that every hole, and he'd throw a ball down and say, hit this one, and hit this with a fade, hit this with a hook. And I got my golf shoes, have all collected all this stuff. And I'm off to the side of the green and on the fringe. And I take a golf tee and I start cleaning the grass out of my cleats. And he exploded on me. He said, what kind of jerk are you? He said, you don't do that on hallowed ground. He said, you go in the rough and you do it. But Tommy was just a lovable guy and a gentleman that to think you'd find at Wingfoot just camping out in his later years was something that made Wingfoot impossible to duplicate.
We're better than Wingfoot to hang out.
Claude Harmon named his after Butch, he named Craig Wood Harmon after obviously Craig Wood.
Yeah.
That's how much Claude thought of Craig. They all had ties in one way or another back to the pros in those days, back to Seminole, where Claude was the head pro. And what most people don't remember is when Claude won the Masters, he was driving up with 6 kids from Seminole to Mamaroneck to Wingfoot, and stopped off at Augusta and won the tournament. So everybody thought that was amazing, but Claude back in those days at Seminole, where all these corporation presidents and everything, and they'd fly people in to play him. He made more money playing golf at Seminole, playing whoever these guys would bring in to play him, would keep the money if he won. And,
Seminole's loaded with bunkers too, so.
Oh yeah.
Plenty of place to put the money.
Yeah, Claude knew where the money was.
Imagine that, Billy getting in your car in Jupiter, Florida, packing up whatever big station wagon or big Cadillac you probably had back then, shoving everybody in there, and everybody's got a seat. Keep quiet. We'll get there soon. And you're driving to Augusta. You had to be more than We're gonna just stop here for a couple of days while Daddy plays a couple rounds of golf.
Well, Mike Brady was only the pro for a very short period of time. And I don't know how old he was when he became pro, but he definitely somehow had an affinity or a familiarity with Craig. And Craig was at that point in his career where he wanted a place to land after his playing career. And, you know, these guys are all very tight. It's nobody knows this, but Claude's brother-in-law was the head pro of Quaker Ridge. And most people don't know that Claude also had a brother, Charlie, who was an assistant to Dave Reagan down in Dubstred in Winter Park, Florida. I remember going over to the range the first time at Dubstred and seeing this guy, and I'm going, man, you look familiar. And he was a skinny Claude. And I introduced myself, and he said, I'm Charlie Harmon. I said, by any chance, and lo and behold, he's Claude's brother. You know, Mike Suchak would show up, you know, especially when the Westchester, or then the Thunderbird had started. But even before that, these guys, when they swung into town, they would come out to Wingfoot and play a round of golf with Claude, and he would give them tips. Dave Marr was there all the time. You know, Ken Venturi, but he had a lot of friends who were members. He probably wanted Claude's job.
I remember Claude giving a lesson behind the hedge.
West.
Fleckman.
Oh,
That's
Marty
who it was,
Fleckman.
Yeah. So he's teaching him, and he tells one of his assistants who's also watching, go up to Mo and get one of those Titleist boxes that they pack drivers in. And he lays it out, you know, basically pointing dead right. So he says, now I want you to aim at the green. So the box is aiming, you know, right of the green by quite a bit. And the middle of it is at the golf ball. And he goes, I don't want you to hit that box on the downswing. So he's trying to teach him how to swing inside out. We always, Judge Gagg always loved the East course. So we always played the East. And one hole in particular, I played with him 2 days in a row, 11 East, and watched him hit driving forward, both him and Claude, driving forward, and the pin's up front on this one day. So it's that's the hardest pin placement on the hole, because it's just a little bit of a landing that you can land on. Judge Gagg knocks it in 3 feet, and Claude knocked it in like 2 feet. Wow. And then the next day, it was like a repeat. I said, this is like a carbon copy.
What was the club they were hitting into the hole?
Forward.
Well,
Claude could hit anything off anything. I was playing with Claude and the judge one day, and you know, Neil was talking about Joe being able to hit the driver off the deck. Well, he had to all the time. So we're playing 14 East, and Joe just smokes this drive. And as it's in the air, I'm saying, get over the trap, get over the trap. And Joe he bounced up in the air and said, what do you mean that's going to be way over the trap? we were just in hysterics. But his second shot was a driver.
1972 U.S. Women's Open, right, at Wingfoot, East Course.
Yeah, Judy Rankin comes in second, but so Friday she shot 300. Thursday she shot 76. Friday she shot 75. Saturday she shoots 76 again, and she 3-putt 5 times. And Thursday and Friday she had several 3-putts also, but I didn't count them, which, you know, we were near the lead. And so her ball striking was incredible. And she wanted me to read every putt, which I did. And
and were the 3 putts.
Judy, I don't know, you know, how to read these putts for you. You hit the ball basically 4 feet by the hole. I hit a lag putt. So I see it totally different. And, you know, I can give you a read for a lag putt, but do you want me to give you a read for hitting it 4 feet by? And she goes, no. Give me the read for a lag putt. And so she went on, three putting, because I'd give her a read and I'd say, if you're going to hit it by, you got to, hit a third of that.
Which is 15 east. They all had trouble with that. It was 320 yards from the white tees. Maybe they were playing it more like 300 because they played a little shorter from the average tees, right?
Yeah.
Why was that
13
hole so hard? I know the green was tough.
That's the
Just
most
because
devious green out
green's
there.
like a Donald Ross green. It's, like a saucer. And if you hit it short of the pin, it can, if the pin's in the middle, if you hit it 10 feet short with any backspin, it'll come right back off the green. So, most of the women were in the fairway, and it's a really hard shot.
I think that's the hardest green of all 72 to read. I could get the same putt 2 days in a row and I'm never right.
Judy, I got to ask you this. How many cups of coffee did you have this morning? And she goes, 4. I go, 4 cups of coffee? I said, you're playing in the US Open. You're nervous. You're going to be nervous as hell. You really want to win it. Tomorrow, 1 or 2 cups tops. And sure enough, the next day she shot 73. But, she was such a nice lady and very generous. She paid me 10% of her winnings.
That's awesome.
Wow.
8 par 3s anywhere. The most unique par 3s from long shots to short shots. And if you have a short hole like 13 East, I mean, you can, as Claude used to say, it's an easy 3 and a hard 5.
I always say it's easier to hit it in 1 than 2.
It absolutely is. So, I mean, I love 13 East. I mean, to have a short shot and so much trouble without water to make a huge number is marvelous. So I'd go with 13 East.
13 East is my favorite. I love 15. I love 17.
What would you say is the most difficult 9?
Well, I think if the wind's blowing 2 clubs, the back 9 of the East is the hardest. I think it showed Tillinghouse genius on that 9. It's only 3,100 yards long from the back tees.
I don't even think you need a two club win. I think relative to, you look at the scorecard and you go, oh man, this is a piece of cake. I'm going to have an absolutely marvelous day playing this 9 holes. Then you come in after 18 and you go, what just happened?
Exactly.
The East, you stop thinking for a moment and you're gone.
Let's say both of you decided to move back to New York for whatever reason, and you're going to buy a house. You're going to have your pick of all the houses on Winged Foot Golf Club. I'm going to go to you, Bobby, first. Which house? Forget about who owns it now.
Set me up there. That's very nice.
1 East.
1 East. Walk to the club.
Wouldn't care about the price of gas anymore.
No, I'd probably move to 10 West.
Behind 3 East.
Behind 3 East.
You could probably still walk to the clubhouse from there.
I'd hitch a ride.
I'd take the house right to the left of 11 West T down there. Next door to Paulie's house.
You know, a guy we never talked about is Fred Corcoran, who started the LPGA and was a tremendous factor in the development of golf. He was the manager for Sam Snead. So he managed all kinds of pros and started the Women's Golf Tour. Fred should be remembered as part of Winged Foot lore.
He was the Mark McCormick when Mark McCormick wasn't even born.
That's right. I'll tell you one story about Fred. Fred didn't drive. So he started the Thunderbird too. So the Thunderbird tournament is going to be on.
The Westchester Classic, as we know it too. Yep.
Yes. And so he comes to me and he said, Bob, I'll give you $100, and all you have to do is pick me up at 7 o'clock, drive me to Westchester, and at 7 o'clock, take me home. That's it. The rest of the time I could walk down the middle of the fairway. I didn't have to park anywhere strange. I mean, it was like total VIP. Then he'd take me in and we'd have breakfast. There'd be a big round table and he'd walk in and there would be at breakfast, Fred, little me, and, Ben Hogan, Sam Snead, Arnold Palmer, Doug Sanders, all these guys every day, somebody new for breakfast. But Fred Corcoran, he was at that house on 15. There was always a cooler.
You're free to go do whatever you wanted to until 7 o'clock at night.
I could watch them. I could stand next to these guys on the range. I could walk down the middle of the fairway. Thank you, Fred Corcoran.
Didn't he set you up playing with Bruce Devlin? Or?
Oh, that's right. Monday qualifying, my job changed. I had to play with Bruce Devlin and Tony Jacklin.
Wow.
So Tony Jacklin was the nicest guy in the world. Bruce Devlin he was stone cold quiet. So I'm playing with them and we're playing a little match for $5. And we get to at the end of the 15th hole, I look at Tony Jacklin and I go, "You're 2 down." Now he'd been talking to Bruce Devlin all day long, not really talking to me. And he went, "What?" I said, "You're 2 down." And I'll tell you what, that's when I knew that my career was not going to be as a professional golfer, because it was like the neon lights went on. I mean, he went 3 on 16, 3 on 17. And I'm making par. At 18, he hits it about 1.5 feet. And I'm thinking, oh boy, am I going to be an idiot and not give him the putt? And so he looks up at me with the biggest smile on his face, and he just misses the putt. So I don't have to give him $5. But boy, the lights went on. It was like the band started up, and this guy was,
Brush back Reggie Jackson.
He was unbelievable. What a lovely, lovely guy.
Memories of waking a sleeping dog, Billy.
Oh, yeah. Let him lie.
Or Billy's favorite horse is Zenyatta, 19 out of 20. And tell Bobby how she
and the race she lost. She only lost, if it was a foot longer, she would have won that one. She came from behind from last all the time. She basically checked out the field in front of her, picked her spot, and when they came down the stretch, it was like, here she comes again. Some of them were close, some of them she blew by. Yeah,
Well,
they said she was extremely smart. She toyed with the crowd. She'd tap her foot like, she was counting or something like that, bob up and down, say hello to everybody. Magnificent.
With all the rounds I played with Claude, we'd start out, his shoes would be untied. And he'd tell me, "Why are your shoes untied?" He said, "I'll tie them when I'm 2 down." Sometimes it never happened.
Neil, Bobby, this is legendary. This is awesome. We really appreciate you coming on the podcast and telling the stories. We know you have more. We'll figure out another time for round 2. But from me, this has just been a joy.
Me too. It was great talking to you guys.
Claude is saying, if you aim at nothing, you'll hit it every time.
Thanks for joining us
Casper,
today.
Billy
We
Harmon,
really appreciate your
Double
feedback.
Indemnity,
And please
Arky,
subscribe to the
Two
show
Outer,
and hit
Claude
the bell
Harmon,
icon so you get notified
Movie
of
Classics,
new episodes.
Mark Gable,
Hit them
Odd
hard
Job,
and hit them off.
Best 36 Holes.